Hello everybody and welcome! Today we're going to talk about and even watch Exploration Mission 1 for the Orion spacecraft performed on a commercial launch vehicle. And I'm happy to report I'm not alone today, because for this video I have joined forces with the awesome Australian Marcus House.
Hey, thanks Shadow Zone for inviting me to throw my 2 cents into the mix. Quite a debate we've had here over the last few weeks.
Did we ever? To settle it, Marcus was kindly helping me setting up my Kerbal Space Program installation to work together smoothly with Realism Overhaul.
Now, just because of the complexities of the Kerbal Space Program mods and support involved, we are all still simulating this back in Kerbal Space Program 1.2.2 with Realism Overhaul and real solar system mods installed. There will be a full mod list in the description for anyone trying to copy this.
The reason why we want to make it as realistic as possible is NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine's recent comments that the massive Space Launch System rocket is struggling to meet the launch deadline for EM-1 in June 2020. So, of course, people like us started to think about alternatives, and I think the most likely launcher for EM-1 would be United Launch Alliance's Delta IV Heavy.
Likely? Are you sure though? Let's not forget Falcon Heavy, SpaceX's rocket, is an absolute beast, way more powerful than Delta IV Heavy, and in fact powerful enough to launch the full Exploration 1 mission in a single launch, just with a tiny little margin of error.
True, since the Delta IV Heavy is rated for only 28.8 tons to low Earth orbit, so yeah, we would have to launch 2 rockets in orbit, one with Orion and the European Service Module, and one with the interim cryogenic propulsion stage. I still think it would be the more logical choice though. I mean, the ICPS basically already is an upper stage of a Delta IV.
I don't know. It seems a lot more complicated to me to get these 2 vessels to dock in orbit, not to mention creating reaction control and docking systems in the first place.
Hey, nobody ever said space was easy, right? Also, Orion has already flown on the Delta IV Heavy for Exploration Flight Test 1, so the effort needed to put another one into space is sharply reduced compared to Falcon Heavy.
Less effort? I'm not sure about that. You can't just wait weeks between launches. Both these Delta IV Heavies would need to go up at pretty much the same time. The ICPS will have its liquid hydrogen and oxygen fuel boiling off constantly, so that thing needs to launch quickly and dock quickly. If there's an issue with either launch, the whole mission will be a failure.
Fair point, but thanks for bringing up hydrogen. ULA already has the infrastructure to fuel the ICPS. It needs liquid hydrogen, same as the Delta IV boosters, while SpaceX utilizes kerosene. Ever since the cancellation of the shuttle program, Launchpad 39A at Kennedy Space Center has not been used for hydrogen, if the hardware is even still functional. Not sure how fast that could be fixed up.
Yeah, okay, so they might have some infrastructure that SpaceX don't have yet. But we've all seen the rapid pace of innovation at SpaceX, just saying.
What, you mean this?
You bring that one up, come on. That nose cone was just temporary anyway, they're building it for real this time.
You know what, let's stop arguing and just do it. I'm going to prove to you here on my channel that it is at least feasible to fly Orion's EM-1 on a Delta IV Heavy, 2 Delta IV Heavy. Anyway, you can then try the same with Falcon Heavy over on your channel. How about that?
Yeah, alright mate, I'll see you guys on my channel for the real mission then.
Real mission, yeah right. Okay, the good stuff is about to start, everybody. Here we go. So, while Marcus is away tinkering around with his Falcon Heavy toy, let's watch a real man's rocket rise into space. Yes, the Delta IV Heavy is going to launch from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and its mighty RS-68A engines are spooling up and getting this thing into space. This is almost the same configuration that the Delta IV Heavy also had for Exploration Flight Test 1, except for a few minor details that we will see later on. But first things first, we're going to need some interface this time and not just watch the launch without anything. One of the reasons is that I want to get a good ascent path to the inclination of the moon. That's what MagJab is for, and the target reticle. And I also need the menu for the booster, the core booster, namely we need to throttle that down. Why? Well, the Delta IV Heavy User's Guide says so. Yes, there is such a thing, and I can link to it down in the description. It also says that after 2 minutes and 30 in the flight, the rocket switches to some sort of what they call wing configuration, meaning the boosters are not now vertically but horizontally aligned, which we can see here. So far everything is going smoothly. I'm heading for quite a steep angle, which I will explain later why I'm doing that. Okay, another event coming up. We're going to throttle down the entire rocket, so all 3 boosters are now throttling down to about 55% thrust. And this is shortly before booster separation. After that we will of course throttle up the center core. So yes, booster separation happening now. Very clean, very nice. And we're throttling up the center core, which is outlined also as well in the user's guide for the Delta IV Heavy. Okay, I'm now switching to Kerbal Engineer to get the moon into my target space and to get the inclination right. Alright, next big event coming up. We are separating our upper stage. In real life, of course, the launch escape system and these 3 panels will separate a little bit after the stage has separated from the rocket. I just messed up the staging a little bit, but it should not matter for the result of this mission, just for the safety of astronauts should they be on board. Alright, as you can see in the left-hand corner, we're having quite the high apoapsis. The reason for that is that the thrust-to-weight ratio of that RL-10B2 vacuum engine at the bottom of the Delta cryogenic second stage is very low. I don't want to fall back to Earth, so we're going to head through a very high apoapse into a little bit of an eccentric orbit. Unfortunately, I could not get this into space any other way. I'm also not as experienced in Realism Overhaul, so yeah, sorry for that. I'm pretty sure the real thing will get that done better. But yeah, here we are now in a stable orbit around Earth. The real EM-1, I believe, will aim for about 280 kilometers of an orbit. But now let's get to the real heavy part of the Delta IV Heavy mission. Yes, the ICPS is sent up in another rocket, of course. And since we are using the miracle of gaming technology, we can build another rocket in 50 minutes and launch it. Realistically, if they wanted to do that, they may launch it from Vandenberg instead of Kerbal Kennedy Space Center, of course. So they could theoretically launch 2 Delta IV Heavies almost at the same time. The question is whether or not they can line up both launch sites in such a way that they meet each other in orbit. Once again, switching to Kerbal Engineer and separating the fairing and the boosters. Now we can have a good look at the ICPS on top and the modifications that I mentioned earlier. Yes, we need to modify the ICPS with a docking ring, you can see on top there, and it also has a few more reaction control thrusters. And this all leads to quite the high payload, so it's above 30 tons, so I had to reduce the fuel in it, which in turn made me reduce some parts of the Orion, so it was almost 23 tons instead of the 24 or 25 tons that the real thing is going to weigh. But still, we managed to get the cryogenic propulsion stage into orbit. And yeah, as you can see here, it's once again a very high apoapse, too high for my taste, to be honest. And we still have to fire the ICPS itself to finish up our orbital maneuver. Otherwise, this would not work, because the complete upper stage of the Delta IV Heavy was spent. And I'm not sure if in real life if it would work any other way. Alright, but we got this into orbit, and now, as you can see, the inclination is very, very good towards our target, namely Orion and ESM. Yes, so we got a rendezvous very soon after. So this all needs to be done quickly in real life because, as Marcus already mentioned, the liquid hydrogen and oxygens are going to boil off in space, which is of course not a good thing. We need that to get to the moon, of course. Space is hard. Alright, we got a rendezvous and we're now firing up that engine again to reduce our relative velocities. Yeah, this is a lot harder in Realism Overhaul than it is in regular Kerbal Space Program, and I'm using the reaction control system very generously because this can get it way more fine-tuned than with the engine itself. Speaking of engine, goodbye Delta Upper Stage. We have separated and we're now going to move towards our ICPS module. And it of course also moves towards the Orion. The ICPS already has some hydrazine and some reaction control system on the aft section, and we just had to include some at the bow. And yes, we have docked. We have now a viable spaceship to get to the moon, which takes about 3000 meters per second of delta V. Before we can fire the engine, we have to once again fire the RCS to get the propellants settled in their tanks, so the engine can actually fire and there are no vapors in the fuel lines. What I'm going to do here is split the orbit into 3 iterations. So I'm going to fire about 1000 meters per second, then I'm going to fly around the Earth again and do that again. And then I'm going to do it a final 3rd time. And discussing with Marcus made my voice a little bit sore, so yeah, please forgive my little more than usually grumbly voice. Alright, you may have also noticed the solar panels I put on that ICPS. Well, it has a probe core and it needs of course power, so I did not want to end up with the ICPS waiting in orbit for Orion to dock and then run out of power. What I'm doing here is performing a plane change. I wanted to make sure that I lose as little energy as possible when going around the moon, and that's why I made a plane change, as you can see on the relative inclination indicator. Since I already raised my apoapse due to the other 2 orbital maneuvers, I was able to do that with a lot less energy than it would have required with a smaller orbit. And I'm also using the RCS here to support the booster, or the engine of the ICPS. So I'm using all the fuel in that, hydrogen, oxygen, hydrazine, whatever. And now Orion is on its own power. So yes, that little spacecraft has to do the final leg itself. And we're getting a good encounter with the moon. Nice. So Orion is finally on its way to the moon for Exploration Mission 1. Now, while we are going there, let's talk a bit about what NASA intends to do. They're planning to do some retrograde orbits around the moon. First they want to fly in a close orbit, then they want to capture the spacecraft of course, then they want to raise the apoapse very high, and not the apoapse but the orbit itself very high. And all in all, it's about 4 maneuvers, which I've already planned here, and they're around about 1000 meters per second of delta V, which we very much still have in our tank. So this is looking rather well at the moment. Speaking of how things look, I think NASA is trolling us with this, because if you look at the shape of these orbits, well, yeah, see for yourself. Enough of that shenanigans, let's do some serious space work up here. Okay, first the capture burn to get Orion in a stable orbit around the moon. So this takes quite a while because this as well is a little bit more tedious than in normal Kerbal Space Program. In the real EM-1 mission, NASA is going to spend a few days in orbit of the moon with Orion. For my recreation, or my simulation rather, I'm going to do just the one orbit, then reduce my periapse to get closer to the moon to make the burn towards Earth a lot more efficient. There we go, firing our engine again, and then as you can see here, we're getting closer to the moon. I could have done that a little bit better, but yeah, this worked out fine, and our final burn takes us back to Earth, as you can see in just a second. There we go. So we're going to graze the atmosphere and therefore reduce our speed so much that we can touch down. And separated the Orion from the ESM. Well, this did not work as explosively as I would have liked, but anyway, we're free from the ESM and we're now going to fly through the atmosphere. And let's hope that the heat shield can hold up to that, because I had to reduce a little bit of the ablator as well to get the weight of Orion down. So yeah, well, there is no crew on board, so not really any danger, and basically the mission is over anyway, but still, fortunately, the ablator was enough and we managed to get through the atmosphere without burning up, although we had some nice particle effects going on there. The only thing we're waiting for is for the parachutes to deploy. And that's it. That is how I would put Orion into space and around the moon with the help of the tried and true Delta IV Heavy.
Okay, so you did kind of make all that look pretty simple, but I've got a feeling I can improve on this with the superior technology and the raw power of the Falcon Heavy.
Superior technology. Okay, if you think you can do this mission better with Falcon Heavy, let's continue this over on your channel and we'll see which one really is the better SLS replacement.
Falcon Heavy.